My feet are killing me. So
I can imagine.
All right, this feels better. So what's your name? We'll start with your name, and then what got you into politics as well?
Neil Mammen.
Okay, nice. And what got you into politics?
Well, I was born in a Marxist family. My cousins are all Marxists and communists. My dad was a communist and an atheist until I was about 5. Actually, I think he stopped being a communist when I was about 2, stopped being an atheist when I was 5. So even though I grew up with a lot of communists and Marxists, my immediate family was Christian. But I was born in Ghana, grew up in Jamaica, Ethiopia, Sudan, Yemen, and India. And I came to the States when I was 18.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, I was actually a socialist, more so because of my background. I was more socialistic. But over the years, I stopped. I was disabused of my socialism because I lost so many arguments with conservatives that I said, I got to look into this.
Yeah.
Ended up, some kid in my I was working with junior high ministry. Some kid said, hey, you got to listen to this guy every day at noon, and it was Rush Limbaugh.
Okay.
So that's where it all started. But what happened was I realized that most Christians aren't involved in politics.
That is true.
And they're afraid of it. In fact, they shy away from it. So I ended up writing a book called Jesus is Involved in Politics. Why aren't you? Why isn't your church?
Wow.
And it goes through all the reasons why Christians should be involved in politics.
Please, I want to hear this.
Okay.
I want to hear this.
It's a little known fact. So I have this little routine I play with pastors. I say, well, do you think Christians should be involved in politics? They say no. I said, well, you know what you're saying effectively is that you believe in child prostitution. And they'll go, no, I don't. I don't believe in child. I said, no, you do, because if you say we shouldn't be involved in politics, then you believe in child prostitution, gladiatorial combat, temple prostitution, abandonment of elders, abandonment of babies in the wild, killing of twins, superstitiously, throwing widows in their husband's funeral pyre, and there's a whole host of these that I list in my book that were all laws that Christians changed because they got involved in politics. And not just Christians, but usually their pastor and their church got involved in politics, and then they changed the laws saying, we got to ban child labor, we got to ban child prostitution, we got to ban all these things. And so I say to the pastor, how heartless can you be to think that Christians should not be involved in politics today? Because if we're not involved in politics, guess what? Our culture will go back to its pagan roots, because that's what happened in Germany when they went back to the pagan roots.
I'm so impressed because I deal with that every day, actually. I'm very involved in politics, but I would like to believe I'm even more so involved in the church. And I find myself battling a lot, you know, do I need to focus on one or the other, or should I integrate the two of them together? But so many times people will tell me, you know, keep church out of politics.
You can't. If you care about the poor, if you care about the innocent, if you care about the unjust, the Bible is full of verses saying, I stand up for the unrighteously persecuted, stand up for the innocent, stand up for the widows and the orphans. And it's not talking about socialism. It's talking about us taking care of them as the church. And this is so important. In fact, Jesus himself was involved in politics and politicians. And people go, oh, that's not true because Jesus was involved in Roman politics. Well, yes, he wasn't involved in Roman politics because he wasn't a Roman citizen. He was a citizen of Judea, right? And when we were governing Iraq, could an Iraqi citizen come to America and run American politics? No. So Jesus was a citizen of Judea governed by Rome. He couldn't go to Rome, but he could get involved in his local politics. Well, who were his local politicians? Well, they had, just like in Iraq, we didn't run the local politics because you can't do that. It's just, you don't have enough people for it. So in Judea, they had their local Senate and they had their local judiciary, and they were called the Sanhedrin. And so who were the members of the Sanhedrin? If Jesus wanted to get involved in politics, if he wanted to talk to his politician, who would they have been? Well, hopefully you're 30 seconds ahead of me, because the members of the Sanhedrin were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And now you see that Jesus was involved in the politics on a daily basis, yelling at his politicians, talking about them, telling them that they're evil, and he was put to death by his politicians.
This guy, this is amazing. Oh my gosh, we could talk all day about this. I love this so much.
So you can go to JesusIsInvolvedInPolitics.com, JesusIsInvolvedInPolitics.com,
okay.
And you can find out all the information there. In fact, we have a little pamphlet you can print out and you can give to your pastor. Because here's the question I ask pastors. If tomorrow the city council came and said, you have to cut your parking in half, what would you as a pastor do? And the pastor would be, well, we'll all show up at City Hall. In fact, the pastor would come out and say, everybody go to City Hall, and say, you can't cut our parking in half. Well, every day, every week in City Hall, they make decisions far more important, life and death decisions about transgender drugs being pushed on kids, all this other stuff, evil stuff happening, abortion, all this stuff happening, and yet you aren't sending your people to City Hall. Why?
Oh my gosh, I love this guy. Okay, now, I'm not done though, I'm not done. I just had to shake your hand for that one because I agree wholeheartedly. I deal with this daily, so hearing it, especially coming so intellectually, I really value that. So, of course. Let's hear now about your shirt.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the other shirt is, we also found it a few years ago, we realized that BLM was fooling Christians. Most Christians didn't realize BLM was Marxist. I mean, back from a Marxist background, I understood the insidiousness and danger of BLM. So we said we need another organization, a Christian organization that is the antithesis of BLM, but uses the same terminology they use. So we came up with a group called Every Black Life Matters. And if you go up, and we use this technique called the Aikido technique, because we know that the problem with the African-American plight, because there is African-American plight. They have a lower literacy rate, they have lower economics, lower income, all that stuff. The problem with it is not racism. It was racism, it's not racism anymore. In fact, the problem with it is government. And so we go to BLMers, not the Antifa guys, but the guys who are not violent, and we say, look, do you care about black lives? And they'll say yes. We'll say, well, do you care about every single black life? Well, and they'll say, yeah, of course we do. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Did you know that in the 1960s, a party, now I don't tell them this, but it's the Democrat Party, wanted to gain all the African-American votes. Because African-Americans before that never voted Democrat. They only voted Republicans because we're the ones who freed them from slavery. So Lyndon Johnson said, I got to get them voting, those ends voting for us for the next 200 years. So what do? He sends in 100,000 social workers into the black neighborhoods to convince them to kick the fathers out of the home. And as a result of that, back in the 60s, maybe 27% of African-American families had no father in the home. Today, it's 72%. Now, as a result, so then we asked the people, so do those fatherless black lives matter to you? Now, of course, they're going to say yes. Yeah. So, okay, now you know what happens when kids grow up without a father. You get crime, violence, drugs, gangs, right? So all these kids are now getting arrested. They're getting into what? Do those gang warfare kids matter to you? Black lives matter to you? Of course they do. Well, guess what happens with this gang warfare? It gets into the schools. Guess what happens to the schools? Schools, they're too busy trying to stay alive and not teach them anything, and they don't teach them anything. So the literacy rate at the height of racism in the 1930s was 70% in the black community. Today it's 17%.
Wow.
80% of black parents want their kids to go to a private school, and they want vouchers. But the union won't let them do it, and a certain party won't let them do it. So those school kid black lives matter to you.
Amen.
Yes, they do. And we start going down the line like
How about black on black crime? Because
that's because of the gangs and violence, right? How do you stop that? You get fathers into those communities. So we have an idea that we say we want to go in. Now, I'm against welfare in general because I think the church should do welfare. But that's a different argument. Right now, the issue is if you're going to give, you should not reward fathers to be out of the home. How about rewarding fathers to be in the home? So our recommendation is Congress should pass a law saying if you collect welfare and there's a father in the home that is genetically related to those kids and married to the mother, you get extra money.
I love it.
Right? And so we start talking about things like that. Yeah, now long term, we don't want any welfare because we think welfare makes people dependent. But let's solve the problem that welfare started, and then we'll go back into it.
That's awesome. So let's shift a little bit more. I love that all, by the way. Great points. Here at GOUSA, it's the first ever political credit rating system. Yep. It judges politicians based on two huge standards. Number one, Constitution. Most valid document, other than the Bible. Number two.
Well, the Constitution is based on the Bible.
Exactly.
Most people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm. Number two is, are you supporting the will of the majority of the American people? So, for instance, late trimester abortions, 10% of U.S. citizens agree with that, yet almost half the politicians. So if you're a politician that supports late trimester abortions, you're not working for the will of the people, so you get a negative opportunity score. It's completely nonpartisan, and it's based off the American people and our founding documents. So do you support that?
Well, I do. I want to make a slight correction. So it is important that we understand that the Republican form of government, founded when, not by the Greeks or the Romans, founded by Moses in Leviticus 18, actually his father-in-law Jethro, So 1,500 years before the Greeks and the Romans show up, Moses has implemented the first republic, right? And there every person is supposed to vote their conscience. But every person has to reveal their conscience to the people who elect them. So this is why we actually have a group called the VAC. You can go to vac.org. And we actually put out voter guides in Silicon Valley and in Idaho, right? So we want this information to be out there. We want people to know who are you voting for, what do you vote for, and a lot of times politicians will lie about what they stand for. So you've got to get a rating system for these politicians, and it's got to be crowdsourced.
Yes.
Right? So absolutely, this is exactly where we're going with this, and you guys are right on the forefront of it.